While on this trip, he stumbled across the shocking history of his new friends. The Shuar warriors of the Hivaro tribe practiced the most extreme form of headhunting, while many other primitive tribes decapitated their enemies and displayed their raw heads. The Shuar people developed a way to preserve and shrink them for display as mementos in front of the victim's weeping family. Through 5 trips, he pieced together the horrifying truth.
No one had ever admitted shrinking a head. They just had remembered growing up and being at ceremonies where this had happened. These things are not really discussed, and they're kind of looked at as, almost like they're erased and didn't happen.
The Hivaro may not willingly discuss it today, but aficionados like Bill Jameson learned the old family recipe, illustrated by this rare archival footage.
Once they arrived, retreating from the enemy's village with the heads, they would start the shrinking process. They would then basically cut up to the crown of the head and from the skull and peel the fleshy part of the skull, hair, everything off the skull. They would then have these calderons simmering. Then the head would be placed into a simmering pot of water under the watchful eye of the warrior. They would then remove it, and they would sew up the back of the neck. They would also sew up the eyes and the lips. And basically you'd have this fleshy cup. Stones would be heated up in a fire and then placed in the neck cavity. The head would be shrinking kind of like wet leather in a dryer. They would also be cutting the hair, trimming the eyebrows to make the face look like it did when they started this project. So they'd have to do some molding. And as the neck cavity got smaller, they would heat sand up. And sand would be put in. It'd take 20 to 30 hours to do this process. Once the head was shrunk to a size that they were content with, they would hang it by a string over an open fire and smoke the head, basically preserving it. In Shuar belief, they believe the soul is in the head, and by shrinking the head, they would capture the soul, sewing the lips and eyes shut. And they believe that this world we're in is really not the real world. The real world is the next world. The enemies, though, that they would kill would go on to the other world and continue battling with their dead relatives. So they would shrink the head and paralyze the soul in the shrunken head, preventing it from going into the other world.
Oddly enough, Bill Jameson ended up buying his first shrunken head only 3 blocks away in Toronto through a classified ad.
I only wanted was one. I got one within a week, the ad going in. But I got 2 more calls within 3 weeks, and then ended up buying 3 heads within 3 weeks. I've always been a collector, collect deco, I collect, when I was a kid I collected baseball cards. I guess it kind of went from there.
But as with any rare form of art costing thousands of dollars, buyer beware.
2 distinct ways to tell a true shrunken head. First off, nose hairs. Shrunken heads always have nose hairs. I haven't seen any fakes with real nose hair. And also the human ear, shrunken, looks identical to a human ear.
It is ironic that these modern headhunters communicate their bizarre interests to each other and keep this primitive trade alive through the advances of civilization and its high-tech tools. As for the Shuar people, they ended this brutal practice just 50 years ago. Now they appear to be a friendly, peaceable people. Of course, that is apparently what one would-be collector thought just 70 years ago.
There's a story that was published in the 1921 National Geographic. Funny enough, a red-headed white fellow went into the Ecuadorian Amazon in an area known as the Oriente in the Ecuadorian highlands, hoping to trade the natives for a shrunken head back when these were quite collectible. And he ended up going from being a collector to one of the collected, and his head came out shrunk. The shuar didn't really shrink white people's heads. They didn't believe we had that soul, the same soul. So there was no reason for it. Maybe there was the odd case that someone might shrink a head so he could acquire a musket or something, but they didn't believe that whites had the soul, so their heads were not shrunk.
Tell that to the intrepid explorer whose fate was beyond bizarre.